New CFO called me overpaid in front of 19 executives. He displayed my salary on screen and said, $320,000 is above market value. I quietly resigned that afternoon. By Monday, 9 major clients terminated contracts. 16 days later, 47% of their revenue vanished. I'm sorry, Lainey, but this salary is indefensible. That's what Nathan Briggs, our new CFO, said, projecting my pay onto a boardroom screen like I was a problem waiting to be solved. 19 people sat there while he reduced 15 years of my work to administrative coordination. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply realized what he didn't. He'd publicly broken the one rule that keeps companies alive. Never humiliate the person who built your revenue. If you've ever been underestimated or devalued, subscribe and tell me in the comments how you handled it. For 15 years I lived and breathed Iron Veil Manufacturing. When I first joined, the company was barely surviving its transition from industrial fabrication to aerospace components. I wasn't hired for glamour. I was hired because no one else wanted the chaos of managing client partnerships that stretched from defense contractors to small suppliers who built the bolts holding jet engines together. I became the bridge between engineering and revenue. Every deal, every relationship, every late-night call from a client on the verge of shutting down their production line came through me. I became the quiet constant in a company that cycled through 6 CEOs, 4 strategy overhauls, and more efficiency initiatives than I could count. My title was Senior Director of Strategic Client Partnerships. But what I truly did was protect Iron Veil from its own blind spots. I learned every client's quirks, the ones who wouldn't sign off on an order unless I personally walked the hangar floor, the one who trusted only me to explain why a delay wasn't a disaster. They didn't just buy parts, they bought reassurance. And I was that reassurance. It was never glamorous work. It was long hours, constant travel, and endless spreadsheets no one ever thanked me for maintaining. Still, I took pride in watching Iron Veil grow from a regional supplier into a national name. We crossed $500 million in annual contracts last year. I didn't celebrate. I was already planning the next quarter's renewals. Somewhere along the way, the board forgot how that number came to exist. They saw charts and margins, not people. They saw cost centers, not trust. When the congratulatory email arrived from the new leadership team filled with phrases like synergy, alignment, and strategic efficiency, I smiled politely. I'd seen the script before. New executives always arrived with shiny credentials and the belief that whatever they didn't understand could be optimized. What they never realized was that the systems they labeled bloated were the very ones keeping clients loyal. Nathan Briggs, the newly appointed CFO, was their latest savior. He came from a consulting firm famous for aggressive cost-cutting turnarounds and bragged about fixing companies from the inside out. In his first week, he announced that our compensation models were misaligned with market benchmarks. Translation: we're spending too much on the people who actually make the place run. I recognized that tone. A smug detachment that confuses spreadsheets with reality. Numbers never scared me. I knew mine better than anyone. I knew what each client generated, the margins they carried, and how my portfolio alone represented 42% of Iron Veil's total contracts. I didn't think anyone could be reckless enough to risk that. But something about Nathan's confidence unsettled me. He walked the halls like he already owned the company, always carrying a new chart, always rehearsing a speech. Still, I told myself what loyal employees always do. Stay calm. Let the data speak. I didn't know his version of data would soon be weaponized against me. I didn't know my name and my salary would become the headline of his grand performance. Nathan Briggs arrived like a man auditioning for a documentary about corporate saviors. He was tall, overly self-assured, and spoke in bullet points as if the world existed only to validate his slides. Within a week, he rolled out an operational realignment initiative. A phrase so vague it could mean anything. And in corporate life, that usually means job cuts. He toured every department, shaking hands he wouldn't remember and asking questions he didn't understand. When he stopped by my office, he wore the kind of smile people use when they've already formed an opinion. Lainey Carter, right? The client whisperer. Impressive numbers, he said, scanning my wall of awards like they were evidence in an audit. We'll be doing some benchmarking to ensure compensation and output are properly aligned. I'd lived through enough restructurings to recognize the scent of a setup. He wasn't evaluating. He was hunting. By his third week, whispers filled the building. Spreadsheets began circulating. Anonymous ones comparing salaries, performance metrics, and industry averages. Someone's snorts had leaked them deliberately, because suddenly people were measuring their own worth through rumors. The mood shifted. Conversations dropped to murmurs whenever Nathan walked past. Every meeting became a performance of self-preservation. I watched department heads nod along to his cost-cutting sermons, too afraid to challenge him. When he wasn't in meetings, he was in HR requesting payroll data under the banner of transparency. HR complied. They always do when power changes hands. I stayed quiet. My instincts told me this wasn't about efficiency. It was about control. He didn't just want the numbers to balance. He wanted loyalty redefined as obedience. That Friday, he released his first internal newsletter titled, "Building a Leaner Future Filled with Corporate Poetry about Aligning People with Performance." He mentioned me without naming me. Departments with above-market compensation structures will serve as examples for operational recalibration. I knew exactly what that meant. I'd become the example. The irony was Nathan had never attended a single client review. He didn't know that the clients he was so eager to reduce to percentages were men and women who had built personal trust in me for over a decade. One of them once told me, "Lanny, we don't do business with Iron Veil. We do business with you." That kind of loyalty doesn't fit neatly into an Excel column. But Nathan wasn't measuring loyalty. He was building a case. I noticed how he started planting phrases in meetings: redundant oversight, streamlining layers, rotation. I'd heard them all before. They were the linguistic smoke grenades executives use to hide a firing squad. People assumed I was safe because of my results. I wasn't so sure. He seemed obsessed with numbers. He could manipulate and blind to the ones that told the real story. I didn't fear change, but I feared stupidity dressed up his strategy. And Nathan Briggs had the kind of arrogance that always mistakes destruction for progress. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in late March during what Nathan called his quarterly leadership alignment session. The title alone should have warned me it wouldn't end well. I walked into the boardroom at 2:58 p.m., coffee in hand, half expecting another round of empty jargon about cutting costs without cutting corners. 19 executives sat around the polished table, the kind that reflected your anxiety back at you. I noticed the large projector screen already lit with a title slide. Operational Efficiency Through Market Alignment. Nathan stood at the head of the room, jacket off, sleeves rolled, face glowing with the self-importance of a man about to make history or a mess. When he began, his voice was calm and deliberate. "Today," he said, "we're addressing a critical imbalance between compensation and contribution." No one breathed. He clicked to the next slide, and my name appeared in bold at the top. Beneath it sat my title, my salary, my bonus structure, and a colorful graph comparing me to industry benchmarks. I froze. For a moment, my mind refused to accept what I was seeing. Then came the words that echoed in my head for days. "This," Nathan said, pointing to my salary figure, "is a perfect example of cost inflation at the executive level." He said it like he was exposing corruption, not a human being. My heart raced, but my face didn't change. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettles bullies more than anger. Around the table, eyes shifted. First to me, then back to him. The air thickened with discomfort. David Lynn from operations stared down at the table. The VP of procurement fiddled with his pen. Everyone knew what this was. A public execution disguised as a presentation. "Laney's compensation is 50% above market rate," Nathan continued as if reading from a manual. "Market alignment suggests a salary between $180,000 and $200,000. We're currently paying over $320,000. Heat climbed up my neck. 15 years of work reduced to a line item. I wanted to speak, but my throat tightened. Finally, I said quietly, "Nathan, this feels like a conversation better suited for a private discussion." He smiled the way people do when they think they've already won. "It's not personal," he replied. "It's just business transparency." I almost laughed. Transparency isn't putting one person's salary on a screen. It's admitting you don't understand the value that number represents. He kept clicking. moving to a slide labeled Revised Compensation Structure. My new package appeared like a death certificate. A 43% cut to base pay, a slashed bonus cap, and no travel budget. This will bring her compensation in line with market standards, he said proudly. A few executives nodded automatically, their survival instincts kicking in. Others avoided my eyes entirely. My pulse steadied. Shock gave way to clarity. This wasn't a discussion. It was a warning shot to everyone else. Nathan wanted to prove he was ruthless enough to gut a veteran without hesitation. He chose me because I represented history. Too experienced, too expensive, too respected, and he mistook that respect for weakness. And of course, he added, this adjustment would save the company approximately $120,000 annually. He said it like he'd rescued a sinking ship, not blown out its engine. I leaned forward slightly, my voice even, just to clarify that $120,000 represents less than 1/10% of the revenue I personally manage. An awkward ripple of silence moved through the room. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. I sat through the rest of the meeting numb. My body there, my mind already gone. When it ended, I walked out without speaking. I didn't return to my office right away. I stood in the hallway staring at framed photos of former leadership teams, men in suits who had come and gone, all convinced they were smarter than the people who built the place. That's when I knew something had shifted. Nathan believed he'd made an example of me. He had, just not the one he intended. When it was over, I didn't storm out or break down. I went back to my office, shut the door, and sat quietly long enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner. 15 years of loyalty erased in 20 minutes of corporate theater. On my desk sat a stack of client notes, handwritten thank yous, photos from plant visits, holiday cards. Each one reminded me my value wasn't on Nathan's spreadsheet. It lived in relationships that couldn't be measured. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my contacts. 127 clients, each a thread in the web I'd built. Then I opened another folder labeled Opportunities. Buried inside was an email from 8 months earlier. Novadine Aerospace. Their CEO, Miranda Holt, had reached out personally, saying she admired my approach to long-term client strategy and wanted me to consider a senior leadership role. I'd declined out of loyalty to Iron Veil. Reading it now, I felt the clear difference between loyalty and servitude. There's a moment when humiliation stops hurting and starts sharpening your vision. Mine came at exactly 3:42 p.m. I drafted my resignation carefully, every word intentional. After careful consideration of today's compensation discussion, I am resigning from Iron Veil Manufacturing Systems effective immediately. I am grateful for the years of partnership and wish the company continued success in its efficiency initiatives. Polite, professional, final. I read it twice before sending it to Nathan and the executive team, CCing HR. The email left my outbox at 3:58 p.m., and something inside me finally exhaled. I packed quietly. Photos, one small award, a notebook of client notes I legally owned. No one stopped me. Most avoided my eyes. They understood the silence that follows a corporate execution. By 4:30 I was in my car, Houston city lights beginning to shimmer through the windshield. My phone buzzed before I reached the freeway. I recognized the number. Laney, this is Miranda Hull. I heard what happened. Tell me it's not true. It's true, I said. They called it market alignment. She paused, then said softly, then let's make sure you never hear that phrase again. Can you come in Monday morning? I didn't hesitate. I'll be there at 9. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, my resignation email still open on the screen. I didn't feel defeated. I felt detached, like watching the final scene of a movie I'd already outgrown. They thought they'd cut costs. They'd actually severed the artery feeding their business. I didn't plan revenge that night. I didn't need to. In industries built on trust, betrayal executes itself. By the time I got home that Friday evening, my resignation had already spread through the company faster than any official announcement. My phone lit up before I even stepped inside. The first message was from Daniel Cho, Iron Veil's Vice President of Contracts. Laney, did you really resign? Nathan's acting like it's nothing. Please tell me he's wrong. I didn't respond. The second call came from a client, Anderson Aerotech, one of our largest accounts. "Laney," Tom Anderson said, his voice tight with disbelief. "I heard you're no longer with Iron Veil. Is that true?" I paused, then answered simply, "Yes, Tom. I resigned this afternoon." There was silence, then a sigh carrying 12 years of trust. "We've done business with you, not the company. If you're gone, I don't see how we stay." I reminded him gently, "Tom, I can't solicit clients under my contract." He let out a bitter chuckle. "You don't have to. I already know where I want to take my business." The call ended with a promise I hadn't asked for. It was the first domino. Within an hour, 5 more calls came in, each a variation of the same question. "Where are you going next?" These weren't transactional voices. They were people who had shared factory floors, last-minute crisis, and after-hours problem-solving with me. By midnight, I had 17 unread messages, all from clients asking for confirmation, some already hinting at switching vendors. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. Their reaction said everything about where loyalty actually lived. Saturday morning, I drove to a cafe and opened my laptop. News moved fast in manufacturing circles, and the whispers had already reached the industry boards. Senior Director Laney Carter resigns from Iron Veil after compensation dispute. One post read. The comments underneath were ruthless. "Cost-cutting gone wrong." Someone wrote. Another added. "They just handed Novodyne their future." I smiled at the precision. Nathan's efficiency initiative was already bleeding into public perception. By Sunday, the trickle became a flood. My LinkedIn post, simple and factual, read, "Grateful for 15 years of learning and growth at Iron Veil. Excited for new beginnings in aerospace partnerships." Within hours, it exploded. Colleagues commented, clients messaged, recruiters emailed. Some replies were subtle shows of support, others openly called Iron Veil's decision corporate suicide. That night, I got a text from Miranda at Novodyne. "They're panicking. We've already had 3 Iron Veil clients ask about transferring contracts." I stared at the screen and realized the revenge had already started without me lifting a finger. Monday morning arrived like a storm front. My phone buzzed non-stop. Texts, missed calls, emails. One of them was from Nathan himself. "Laney, we need to talk. Clients are reaching out with concerns. Please respond." I didn't. I was already sitting in Miranda's office at Novodyne, signing paperwork for my new role as Chief Strategy Officer. She slid the contract toward me, her expression split between amusement and disbelief. "You've caused quite an earthquake, Laney," she said. "Iron Veil's board called an emergency meeting this morning." I signed, my hand steady. "I didn't cause anything," I said. They did. That afternoon, screenshots started coming in from former colleagues, formal termination notices from Iron Veil's biggest clients. Each cited relationship discontinuity as the reason. 9 by noon, 12 by evening. Everyone represented millions in revenue. Iron Veil's phones must have been ringing off the hook. That night, Nathan called again. His voicemail was shorter this time. "If you're intentionally coordinating this, we'll take legal action." I listened twice, then deleted it. I hadn't broken a single rule. I hadn't called anyone, sent an email, or encouraged anything. I had simply left, and the clients had chosen who they trusted. Trust, it turns out, doesn't obey non-compete clauses. By the end of the day, Iron Veil's cost alignment had turned into a client exodus worth over $100 million. And that was just day one. By Tuesday morning, the damage was already visible in numbers that made Nathan's salary charts look like jokes. Iron Veil had lost nearly $180 million in contracts within 48 hours. I didn't need confirmation. Former colleagues kept sending updates in disbelief. "It's chaos here." One message read, "They've set up a crisis task force." I imagined Nathan pacing the same boardroom where he'd called me overpaid, still clutching his slides while the company bled revenue faster than he could explain it. At Novodyne, my onboarding was swift and purposeful. Miranda skipped speeches. "We'll stabilize relationships first," she said, handing me a list of clients who'd reached out on their own. Most of the names were familiar. Anderson Aerotech, Deltamac, Crown Systems, all former Iron Veil partners. Each contract carried years of trust built over time, not quarters. When I called them, they didn't need convincing. "Lainey, we just want to work with people who know what they're doing," one CEO told me bluntly. "You've never let us down." I didn't celebrate. I went straight to work. Within a week, my small team had secured commitments from 16 companies totaling nearly $200 million in new business. Novadine's leadership was stunned. I wasn't. This is what happens when loyalty has a face. Meanwhile, the headlines spread beyond industry circles. Iron Veil faces client retention crisis following executive departure. The articles quoted unnamed insiders describing panic and collapsing client confidence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan had wanted transparency. He was getting it, just not the kind he could manage. By week's end, the numbers spoke for themselves. 22 contracts gone. Operations unraveling, emergency layoffs looming. I didn't post. I didn't comment. I let silence do the work. The louder Nathan defended his decision publicly, the worse it sounded. "We're undergoing strategic optimization," he said in one interview, his voice tight. The market heard collapse at Novadine. Miranda and I watched the broadcast from her office. She shook her head. "He still doesn't understand, does he?" "No," I said. "He thinks revenue follows titles. It follows trust." The next Monday, a formal letter arrived from Iron Veil's legal department, accusing me of violating my non-compete through indirect client influence. I almost laughed. My lawyer replied with one sentence: "Our client has not solicited anyone." Iron Veil's former clients appear to have made independent business decisions. That ended it. Nathan called later that day. His voice had changed. No arrogance, no performance, just fear. "Lainey, please. We need your help transitioning these accounts. We're losing control," answered calmly. "Nathan, you made it clear I was overpaid. I'm sure the person you hired at market rate can handle it." He tried reason, emotion, guilt, but there was nothing left to save. The company that reduced me to a line item was now watching its bottom line evaporate. By quarter's end, Iron Veil's revenue was down 47%. Layoffs followed. Entire teams dismantled to absorb the damage. Nathan disappeared from public view after the board removed him in an emergency session. When the news broke, I felt no triumph, just a quiet calm. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I had simply walked away, and the absence of what I built did the rest. Revenge without touching a thing. That's the cleanest kind there is. Iron Veil didn't survive the year. 3 months after Nathan's presentation, the company was quietly acquired at less than half its previous valuation. The official statement blamed unexpected market conditions, but everyone in the industry knew the truth. When you humiliate the person holding your relationships together, you don't just lose talent, you lose trust. I didn't watch their downfall with satisfaction. It felt like watching a slow-motion crash I'd already escaped. By then, I was at Novadine in an office overlooking downtown Houston, leading a team that understood what partnership meant. The irony was sharp. Iron Veil once tried to cut my pay to save $100,000. They ended up losing hundreds of millions trying to prove loyalty could be replaced by spreadsheets. Novadine thrived. Within 6 months, I rebuilt a portfolio stronger than the one I'd left behind. 43 clients, many former Iron Veil partners who moved on pure trust that working with meant stability. Miranda gave me full autonomy, trusting the instinct Iron Veil dismissed as emotional management. It wasn't emotional. It was relational. In aerospace manufacturing, one missed shipment can cost millions. People don't trust systems. They trust the person who answers the phone when everything goes wrong. The first time I walked into a client review meeting at Novadine, one of them smiled and said, "Glad you're back, Lainey. It finally feels like we're dealing with adults again." That meant more to me than any award I'd ever received. Over the next year, Novadine's growth rate doubled. We reached milestones Iron Veil had once labeled impossible. Then, 18 months after my resignation, Harvard Business Review published a case study titled "The $20,000 Cost Cut That Destroyed $400 Million in Revenue." It used Iron Veil as a cautionary tale of how market alignment thinking can annihilate relationship-driven businesses. My name wasn't in the headline, but it didn't need to be. The people who mattered already knew. A framed copy of the article sits on my desk today, not out of pride, but as a reminder of what arrogance costs. I kept one other relic from my Iron Veil years. A photo of that boardroom screen with my salary projected in red letters. It hangs beside my Novadine leadership plaque. Every time I look at it, I remember the silence in that room, the stars, the humiliation. Then I remember what followed, the calls, the clients, the quiet revenge that didn't require a single word. Sometimes power isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and absolute. People ask me now what I learned from it all. I tell them this: if a company ever calls you overpaid, don't argue. Just let them discover what your absence really costs. Because one day, the same people who undervalued you will rewrite their own downfall into a lesson they paid dearly to learn. When I look back, what happened at Ironvale wasn't just corporate drama. It was a lesson in value, dignity, and silence. For years I believed loyalty was its own reward, that if I worked hard enough, people would recognize my worth. But in the end, it took humiliation for me to understand something essential. You can't stay loyal to people who treat your devotion like a discount. When Nathan called me overpaid, I realized some leaders confuse cost with worth, and that staying silent in the wrong place isn't humility, it's surrender. Walking away wasn't about revenge at first. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my self-respect, my expertise, my peace. But life has a way of balancing scales without you lifting a hand. When Iron Veil collapsed under the weight of its arrogance, it wasn't my victory. It was their lesson. I didn't destroy them. They did that the moment they mistook a person for an expense. The real win wasn't the contracts that followed me. It was waking up without resentment, knowing I didn't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. It cuts through noise, ego, and power games more effectively than any argument ever could. The lesson I took from all this goes far beyond boardrooms. Whether it's your job, your friendships, or your marriage, never stay where your worth has to be defended more than it's recognized. Loyalty is honorable, but it should never cost you your voice. The people meant to stay in, your life will never make you beg them to see your value. They'll simply know. If you want to start today, write down 3 places or relationships where you feel unseen or undervalued. Ask yourself, if you left tomorrow, what would actually collapse without you? That's where your leverage lives. Start setting quiet boundaries. You don't need to announce them. Just stop apologizing for your worth. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own turning point and subscribe to hear more stories where silence speaks louder than revenge.